Okay, in this video I am going to show a DIYer homeowner how to install a deck mounted tub fixture. Some people call it a spout, like whatever you want to call it, faucet is fine. But basically this is a retrofit, so in other words this is not a new tub, this is an old tub, and I got rid of the old fixture that was here, and it was probably in excess of 25-30 years old, so it needed to be changed out. It was outdated, and the customer has bought a new one, which is this Moen. So the Moen actually is going to be the style of all of their hardware in here, and as you can see, it sets right on top of the tub surface. It doesn't really matter if it's deck mounted. When I say deck, this is part of the deck, or if it's tub mounted. Basically the installation is the same. So what comes in the box is basically this, and this looks very complicated to some people, I suppose. The hardware that's in here is very limited. Comes in a bag, and separate bag with this plug, and I will explain that in a minute. Sometimes when you get a lot of hardware, it's easy to get overwhelmed. So the easiest thing that I've found to do is separate them. So the only thing that's in here is 3 of these locking rings, 3 of these spacers, and there are 3 nuts also in here. And so the 3 nuts and all 3 of these 3 items look different from each other. So if you separate them out and you know you have 3 areas that you're going to be putting them on, it makes it very, very simple. Anyway, so getting back to this fixture, again, this looks very complicated, but it's not. All that is a hole, and that goes for the faucet itself, or if you will, this part, which is going to go right on top of here, and the cardboard is just basically helping the threads not get damaged on both the left and the right side, which is hot and cold, and it is marked accordingly with what should be red. In this case it's orange, and the other one would be blue. The cartridge is actually embedded into it, and so a lot of care has to be taken when sweating this thing. When I say sweating, I mean soldering. As you can see, this particular one is pre-soldered, so the middle portion was soldered by virtue of this T onto both the hot and cold side. This particular one that the customer bought will not fit, because these 3 holes that were pre-drilled 25-30 years ago specifically for the faucet they had then is not going to fit these 3. In fact, the main problem is that there's not 3 anyway. If you notice, these 2 go into here, and then this one actually sets up higher, so it won't work. But in addition to that, and more importantly, we're probably about 3 inches off from this side, the middle, and that side, so that won't work. Anyway, Moen is good enough to have a retrofit, which are individual, which is exactly what I need. So all of the trim pieces, which is the faucet itself, and the handles, right, don't need to be bought. All you need is a body. And so we just put that body aside and picked up this body, which is 3 separate pieces. And these trim pieces that came in this box will fit on this body. Anyway, getting back to this. So what basically you have is what's in this bag already, which I already said are these locking nuts, these washers, and the nuts themselves to hold it on. And I've already put the nuts on all 3 of these and already did some of the measuring. So basically, if you put this, which is the middle part for the tub spout, remember the hole? Right, so if that's the middle part for the tub spout, if you put this up through the middle hole there, you'll see these 2 ends here that are already ready to take, we're going to call that a female end, and they're ready to take this male end. And so if you put that up there and lock it down with the spacer, right, which goes on here. It slides right up inside that hole, and then lock it down with one of the nuts that you have provided. I'm sorry, the locking nuts that you have provided. And that's going to be your space for your tub deck right there, or for your tub. Then you'll be able to figure out, once this middle part is put in, it has the same T that we have with here, right? Except that it's not soldered already. So we have the same T ready to be soldered right there and right there for the hot and the cold. So if you put that up inside the middle and you do the measuring, which I've already done, with your hot and your cold, you're going to see if it fits. And if it doesn't fit, you're going to cut off the excess, which I've already done already. See there? That piece was there, that piece was there. So I've already pre-measured and found out in order for this middle part to fit, these two pieces had to be cut off because they're too long. So that just slides in. Oh, I'm sorry. So what you need is, you need one of these little pieces right here. Actually, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. This is basically plumber's sandpaper, or you can use one of these and just ream out, and you'll notice that this is kind of roughed up, and that's what you want. So you can do it with one of these, or you can do it with sandpaper. On the inside part of here, same thing. You see how it's kind of roughed up? So you do it with one of these, and you just put it in there and kind of ream it out a little bit. So these two pieces, once the solder is applied, will fit in nicely. And then, hold on a second. So that goes just like that, and both pieces get soldered. Now, a word of caution. As I said earlier, the valves themselves are already inserted into these, and so you can take them out if you feel like you can take them out safely, but most people just go ahead and solder the way it is. So what I suggest is, you have, well, anytime you do soldering, you should have some water handy, just in case you run into an issue with fire or something like that. But also, more to the point, you should have a sponge excuse me, so that as soon as you do the solder, as soon as you do what they call a sweat connection right here, and you solder it up, that you immediately apply that sponge on top of there with water, lots of water on the sponge to cool it down, so that way the heat won't get transferred up and around here and ruin these valves, because they are plastic and they will melt. And if they melt, then you're kind of screwed. You know, you have to go back and get another one. So that would not be a good thing. So have some water handy, wear safety glasses, and some say you should have a fire extinguisher handy anytime you sweat pipe. But again, you know, having water is the next best thing. So there you go. So I'm going to basically show you how this gets sweated in. What you do is a dry run first. So as I said before, you know, you put this middle part in there, you lock it down, and you put these two pieces in and you lock those down, and then you measure and see if you have to do any cutting of these two pieces. If you do, you go ahead and cut them, you sand them off, and you apply, hold on a second, you apply I'm not prepared totally for this, what's called flux. So you have a little brush and you have some flux, and you apply it liberally on both ends here and both ends there, and then you're ready to sweat it in. So that's basically that. The other thing I wanted to kind of mention to you also is on the bottom part, which you're going to notice where the water connections are at. I have both the hot on this side and the cold over here that I'd already cut off when I took out the old valve. These are sharp bite caps. So as soon as I took those out, I went ahead and capped those off so I could turn the water back on for the customer. Those come out very easily if you're not familiar with sharp bites. This little tool right here, if you wrap it around, push it in there, and you push up on that little plastic part, it'll pop right out. So those are convenient little reusable caps that I really like. Another great thing about sharp bites is that we want to put as little heat as possible on here, as I said before, and then cool it off right away so that you don't melt your valves. But also you have sharp bite connectors. So when I take these off eventually, after I shut off the water, these caps, I will put this sharp bite onto that pipe, and this sharp bite will go onto that pipe. It makes it very, very easy for a homeowner, so you don't have to do too much sweating. This, unfortunately, you're going to have to sweat no matter what, but it's two little connections that are relatively easy. The other thing is that once you get a really, really good measurement and you're absolutely sure that all three of these are going to fit in the hole based on the cut that you did on the pipe, then you pick up the whole thing and you put all three of those through the hole. It's a little difficult to do, but make sure that all three of those fit through the hole the way they're set, just like it is, because you're not going to be able to sweat down here, right? You're going to have to sweat the pipe outside of here, and then know that all three of these are the exact measurement you want. You could use a tape measure if you want. Just measure center of that hole, center of that one, and that one. Get your measurements and make sure that all your centers are correct. So you just measure the center of this, and that stem, and you will be safe. Once you're absolutely 100% sure that you have the correct measurement, then you can go ahead and make these sweats right here and here. And as I said, cool them off. I can't emphasize that enough. Make sure you cool those off. This here, all that is a plug. It's a test plug. So once you've done all that stuff and you actually got the water back on, then you would turn this rightsy-tightsy onto there. It has a little O-ring on the top of there to stop water from coming out. And then you can go ahead and turn on your valves and make sure that everything is nice and tight and sealed. But that's basically it. It's a relatively easy process to do, and I will be back in a few minutes to show you the sweating. Okay, so I'm at a point where I'm ready to make these connections final. One of the things I did is I put a little 1/2-inch piece of Durarock right under where I'm sweating at for two reasons. One, because it keeps the fire off of my floor, and Durarock is great for that. Also, if you notice that these are flat now, so that the connections are off the ground and that all three of these are straight. So in other words, it'll line up perfectly once we put them up into the holes. So that's the reason I've done that. So as you can see, I've taken my flux and I've brushed both on the inside and the outside. It's a very liberal amount of flux on both sides. And I'm basically ready to go. I have my sponge ready to heat things down, or to cool things down rather. Speaking of heating, this is matte gas, and this can be bought at Home Depot or just about any plumbing place. Matte gas gets up to much higher temperature than just, you know, butane type of torch. The blue ones are what you're probably used to seeing. Those torches really don't low temperatures. In other words, it'll still work, but you're going to put a lot of heat on it for a long time in order to make those connections, which is not what you want. So this is an automatic igniter torch. This torch actually will get hotter as well as using the matte gas, and that's very important. You want to heat it up as quick as possible and be done with it as quick as possible. So I'm going to try to set this camera up in such a way that you can watch the sweating process. So another thing about sweating pipe, the place that your connection is at, which is right here, that's where you want to put the heat. You don't put the heat on both areas, and you definitely don't put it on this side here. So the place where your connection is at, in other words, female side, that's always where you want to put the heat. You want the solder, which is right here. Okay, this is just regular. They used to call it 50-50 solder with lead, but they make it lead free now. The solder wants to be drawn up inside of that female end. In order to do that, you put the heat on this end here, so that when you put the solder on, the solder is automatically drawn inside. And that's very important to do also. That's all there is to it. You notice that I resoldered this end here. The reason I did that is I saw a little bit of movement and when I was putting the sponge on it I saw some movement, so I wanted to be sure that the connection was good, and that's why I did some resoldering. But as soon as I got an opportunity, I poured direct water right on top of it so that it wouldn't be an issue of these valves getting hot. You might want to just make sure these valves up here, it's a little bit warm to the touch, but it isn't bad. You just don't want to overheat, and that's the whole point. So then when you're finished, there's going to be a little excess solder laying on the other side, which is fine, but you want to make sure. So you see that? So a little excess solder going on the other side where it pooled. That's not a big deal. The main thing is that you want to see that the solder has gone into every connection. And in this case, my right side looks really good. My left side looks good, but it's a little questionable on the top. And for that reason alone, I'm going to go ahead and add a little more solder to that top end, just to be sure. As soon as I can get this stable. Okay, so anytime you resolder, you also want to reflux. So I'm going to put a little flux on there. And really what I should do is also take this and scrub it off a little bit. Normally, that's what you would do. In this case, I'm pretty confident I can get this going. Perfect. That's what I like to see. And that's it. So that's how you sweat pipe. Quick lesson in that. And like I said, you're just making sure that the whole side doesn't have any holes or anything. You don't want to get this whole thing installed to find out you have a small leak. That would really suck. Anyway, so you're ready to go on this. And if you notice, since my left side, since my right side is my hot side, I'm going to go ahead and dry fit it. And it's a perfect fit. So the only thing I have to do next is put those nuts on that hold it down. Follow the directions on how much nut, or how much of this, follow directions on how much of this area that you want coming up, because it specifically tells you that after you put your locking ring on, that you should have right there where that little open space is at. And it tells you on the directions. And then it also tells you on the directions that the middle part should have about 1/8 of an inch, which I have right now once the locking nut is on. So if you follow those simple directions, you can't go wrong. It's very, very easy. Okay, so I went ahead and set up the whole fixture up underneath the tub. You know, brought it up inside like that. I put my locking rings on, all 3 of them. Also, something else to know, as you saw before, there's a nut and a washer up under here, the underside of here. And some people are like, well, how do I get that nut tightened down there? Well, there's called a basin wrench, and a basin wrench can get you there, but you're going to be on your back and with a flashlight and everything. The nice things about these top locking nuts is that they have this little edge on here. So you can get an extra large set of channel locks. You can actually set it on there, and that bottom nut will not move when you tighten it down. So long story short, you can tighten it down from the top and make it very easy on yourself. This whole process took me, because I'm doing the video, a little longer, but the whole process of putting the new tub fixture in would take me 15 minutes, maybe 20 at the most, if I had to read the directions. Which I suggest you do. Anyway, so the final process, if you see here, this is where the tub body or the faucet body is at, and this is the down part of your supply, and this is where my shark bite cap is at. So fortunately these lines are very flexible. I can move them around and it won't be any problem at all once I get that cap off to put this connector shark bite on here. So it'll go right here and then on the other side. One of the other things too, you might want to go ahead and sand off these ends, both this end and that end, before you put the shark bite on. It just helps a little bit. So that's all you do, pop that in there. You do the same thing on the cold side, and again, my cold side is flexible, so I won't have any issues at all getting it to where it needs to be right there. So that's it, piece of cake. And you know, if you did something like this yourself with those two little sweat connections I just showed you, if you're confident enough to do it on your own, you probably save yourself anywhere from $300 to $500. Typically that's what the plumber is going to make. If you know somebody, they might do it for $150 or $200, but you're going to save some money doing it yourself for, you know, a 15-20 minute job. So there you go. So the final phase, once you have those connections made underneath and your water's on, is to check for leaks, obviously. And you can put that plug I was telling you. You have the female threaded side here, and this is a male threaded side also, and you just screw that on there, turn your water on, check for leaks. And if you're leak free, the next thing is the trim kit. So that would be the spout. The spout actually has, if you can't see it, but there's an O-ring in there to keep the water in its place, and you just push it down. Once it's pushed down in this other package, you have a little set screw and an Allen wrench, and the set screw actually goes into this hole right here, and it sets this in place. It anchors it so it won't go nowhere. And then in addition to that, you have a little cap, so the cap just pops right inside there to hide the hole. Most of these handles and slash scutcheons are always the same. So once you have it set on there, all you have to do is turn it down onto the thread until it bottoms out. So it's fully bottomed out. Look at this, I'm doing it with one hand. That's how easy this is. That one never got caught. There we go. I didn't catch the threads on the first try. And then once you bottom out on it, you are good to go. And it's, you know, that easy. So off and on, and you're done.